Something like £1,200 million a year we spend every year on trying to fix our hair the way we want it.
We make a lot of judgments about people simply by what they do to their hair and how it looks to us. And here we have 4 distinct hairstyles which belong to our 4 guests, who are a rock musician, a model, a management consultant and a doctor. But I'm not going to tell you which is which. The audience here are going to work that out for themselves. Now, you've all got your voting cards there. Which of our guests, who've got numbered masks, as you see, do you think is the rock musician? Hold up the cards. I think on balance, 4 just takes the field there. Right, number 4. Now we're going to vote for the model. Which one do you think is the model? Any easier? 1 is very popular over there. 1, I think, slightly carries the field this time. Now, management consultant, that should be easy enough. 1, 4. A lot of 1s there, a lot of 4s. Okay, finally, where's the doctor? 1s and 2s make an early showing, and probably there, I'd say it's about equal between 1 and 2. Right, well now let's find out who's right and who's wrong, as we ask them to reveal themselves. First of all, would our rock musician please show his face? Number 3. Took a few of you by surprise. Now, will our model reveal? Number 1 was the model. Right, then we come to the management consultant. And finally, that leaves the doctor. Right. Julia, welcome. How long have you been colouring your hair in that distinctive way?
About 3 years.
How did the patients react to it?
Very favourably. They think it's super. In fact, I was doing a ward round a few weeks ago, and a chap who had been a patient but wasn't anymore said, "Oh, doctor, can you just do me a favour, please? Could you put that blue bit back in your hair again?" He said, "Oh, it was nice, and it's fading out now."
Great. How about your colleagues?
One of my bosses, in fact, who gave me the job with a little pink streak in my hair, was a little bit surprised when I turned up with a big blue one when I started the job, and he took me on one side and said, "Julia, I think perhaps you've gone a little bit over the top this time." But he's been very good about it.
So you didn't frighten him off?
Not too much.
Julia, thanks very much. Thanks to all our guests. Thank you very much. So that seems to show that consciously or unconsciously, we do tend to judge people by their hair.
Well, so much for the hairs on your head. What about on the rest of the body? Well, in fact, we all have virtually the same number of hairs over the body surface. Now, Mr. Coburn, you've come along tonight with your 4-month-old twins, Charlotte and Christopher, and you may think that you've got more body hairs than they have, but that's not actually so. It may just look that way because your body hairs, your mature ones, are much thicker and darker, whereas their little baby hairs are very pale and fine. And in fact, apart from special areas like the lips and the nipples, on all our body surfaces, the only areas that don't have hairs are the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. The other 98% actually has more hair on it than a chimpanzee has. If we just look at the twins for a moment, the only areas where they have mature hairs are the eyelashes and the eyebrows, and that's obviously to protect their eyes. And apart from on their heads, the only areas where they're definitely going to develop those mature hairs are under the arms and in the pubic regions. Now, you may know that in you and Christopher, that's because of male hormones, but in fact, surprisingly, the same is true in Charlotte. She'll also have male hormones that influence her hair growth. Thank you all very much. But it's not just male hormones that determine how hairy we are. That also depends on what we inherit from our parents, our genes.
And when our genes do finally decide to switch on mature hair growth, this is where it actually takes place. This is a slice through a typical hair follicle. And you can see here the elongated sort of pocket which dips below the surface of the skin, and this yellow area is the actual sort of hair shaft which is forming. Let's just look down at the business end here. This is the papilla, which is the sort of hair root, and that's a very active region. That's where the hair cells are being formed in their millions. Nutrients, goodies, are drawn from the bloodstream here and converted into lots and lots of hair cells. And the hair cells are really very special because they have the ability of producing a special protein, a tough leathery protein, which gives the skin, which gives the hair that terrific strength. And as they're formed, millions of them, they're forced further and further up the shaft, rather like toothpaste being squeezed out of a tube. At the same time, pigment cells are also moving in and producing a pigment. So by the time the cells get to the top of the skin here, the surface of the skin, they're completely dead. They've been choked off by the amount of protein that's built up inside them, and the pigment cells are completely formed into the natural colour of the hair. Now, the structure of the hair is very interesting. There's a soft core, but around that are all these strands of protein fibre, which really make the hair very, very strong, withstanding the stresses and strains. But most important of all, perhaps, on the outside of the hair is a covering, which again is the special protein, but this time it's in the form of scales. It's called the cuticle, and it's in these sort of scales which act a bit like armour plating, and they protect the hair from all sorts of bashes and insults.
In fact, you can feel the cuticle on your own hair. We'll have a go at this. If you just wet your fingers a little bit and then pull out, just try and get a single hair round about where your ear is. All right? Now, if you pull that hair out straight and then rub your fingers along from your scalp out to the end of the hair, that should feel nice and smooth. But if you rub it back the other way, have a go, that should feel much rougher. And if you keep on doing it, if you go backwards and forwards, you might actually hear a kind of scratchy, squeaky sound. Anybody do that? Violins on your own hair strings. Now, the reason it feels smooth one way is because in that direction all the cuticles are lying flat on top of one another, but when you push the hair back the other way, all the cuticle scales are being made to stand up against one another.
Well, being up here on the surface of the scalp makes me wonder, why is it that some hairs are straight, whereas others are curly? Well, here's a curly one. The answer is, of course, that the hair-forming cells don't all work at the same rate. Sometimes they're a bit lazy, they slow down a bit, and perhaps other cells on the other side of the hair work really hard, and that produces a curly hair. OK, now then, what about the other question? Does hair which you cut really grow more strongly? Well, the answer to that is no. That's a total myth. All that happens, let's say we cut the hair, say, there. Well, all that happens is you just take off the flimsy, soft tip of the hair, like that. And, of course, you cut it down in the thick part of the shaft. And that's where the hair is really strong and tough, and it leaves a stub, and that's like the stubble that you get on your chin when you shave. And, of course, that's totally dead hair. I mean, it doesn't make any difference to the growing of the hair. It's still growing all the time from down below. Even if I actually pluck the hair out like that. Again, it doesn't make any difference because all that's happened is I've just broken the hair at its weakest point, and that is below the surface where the dead cells are just beginning to form. They're actually going leathery and dying off. The live cells are still there down below, still pushing the hair out. On it comes, never stops. Darn boy.
So the hairs just keep on growing regardless. But how fast do they grow? Let's take some opinions from our audience here. Could you put your hands up, please? Anyone who thinks that your hair might grow at, say, 2 feet in a year? 2 feet a year. One vote for that. How about 1 foot a year? Yes, more of you seem convinced by that. How about 6 inches a year? Yes, well, the last group are right. It does, in fact, grow at 6 inches a year, and it's more or less the same for everybody. We don't really notice how long it's growing because we go and have it cut every now and again. But I'd like you to meet 2 ladies here who haven't had their hair cut for quite some time. Kalwant Singh and Jean Burgess. Kalwant, first of all, when did you last have your hair cut?
I've never cut my hair.
You've never had it cut?
No, never.
And can I be cheeky and ask how long it's been growing then?
Just under 40 years.
40 years, right. Jean, how about you?
33 years.
33?
33 years.
Not quite as long, but can I ask you to let your hair down and show us what you've grown in that time? That's quite a head of hair. Do you know how long it is?
75 inches long.
75 inches. That's longer than you are. Well, Kalwant, you've been growing it for even longer. Let's see what you've managed to produce. Well, quite a striking difference. 7 years longer, but the hair itself is a good 3 feet shorter. Now, why should that be? It's not that Jean's hair grows any faster. The answer is that each individual hair has a limited lifespan. And at the end of that lifespan, it falls out to become replaced by another hair. And how long that time is depends precisely on who you are. So Calwant can never grow her hair as long as Jean because each of her hairs has a lifespan of about 6 years, whereas Jean's have a lifespan of probably twice that much. Thank you both very much indeed. Now, when I say that your hairs reach the end of their lifespan and then drop out, you might wonder why they don't all drop out at the same time. And you can, in a way, see the answer to that if you look at some hairs, say on the back of your arm, and you'll see that the hairs are all different lengths. And that's because they're at different stages of growth. They're different ages. And it's the same on the scalp. The little tiny short hairs are just starting out, but the longer hairs are the older ones, and soon they'll be falling out.
This is one of those hairs that stopped growing. When a hair reaches its natural length, the papilla goes into a resting phase that lasts about 100 days. And after that, the papilla will start to manufacture hair cells again. But this time, it's a new hair. And you can see the new little hair growing. There's that small yellow area at the bottom of the follicle. So, with that new hair growing up, eventually this old one will be pushed out. And we actually lose about 80 to 100 hairs like that every day. And you'll notice most of them when you wash or brush your hair. And there's nothing you can do to prevent it. We're simply losing hairs that have reached the end of their natural life cycle.
So when a hair drops out, it's usually replaced by another one, but not always. Some papillae just give up working. But if you have a look at my balding bit, you'll see that although the big hairs have disappeared, it's not hairless. There's still a covering of that very fine downy baby or vellus hair. Now, over the centuries, men have tried to put the clock back by persuading these baby hairs to develop into big, strong, thick, mature hairs, just as they eventually do on a baby's scalp. And they've tried some pretty weird and wonderful remedies, I can tell you. This one's here, very tried and tested from about 400 BC. It's a poultice. Can I apply it? It's not hot. There we are. You just apply the poultice to the pate. Now, it's made of crushed horseradish, cumin, beetroot, and pigeon droppings. Yes, you can take it off, certainly. Now, you're losing a few hairs there. I could apply this remedy here, but I don't think I will because it's a bit dodgy. It's arsenic. And in the 11th century, a Hungarian priest claimed that he could cure baldness by applying arsenic to the head and also reading an appropriate prayer, which was probably a wise precaution. But this one is the best-seller. Hair restorer, which was very, very popular in America during Prohibition because it's neat alcohol. And in fact, it was the only alcohol that you could buy across the counter at that time. Well, it didn't cure the baldness, but it stopped you caring about it.
Cheers. But in fact, none of those cures worked. And until recently, nobody could advertise a cure for baldness. It would have been false claim. But just take a look at this. Baldness breakthrough, it says. And it goes on to say that there's a new treatment which can, in some cases, promote the growth of new and thicker hair. Well, the advertising watchdog body has passed that advert as truthful. And strictly speaking, it is true. There is a drug which can actually make baby vellus hair start growing thick and mature. Well, that drug is minoxidil. It was originally produced to treat high blood pressure, and for that purpose was taken as a tablet by mouth. But doctors started noticing a very intriguing side effect, and that is that some of their patients, some of their bald patients, actually started to produce thick, mature hair again.
The minoxidil tablets can be ground up and made into a very weak solution, and that's been used to restore hair growth in a few balding men in controlled hospital experiments. But that doesn't mean that there's a miracle cure for baldness just around the corner. First of all, when you stop using the minoxidil, all the hairs that have regrown fall out. And before you cheerfully commit yourself to using the lotion for life, it's worth knowing that some serious side effects can result from using big doses of minoxidil.
The Committee on Safety of Medicines have been looking at test results recently and hoping to discover a lotion of ideal safe strength which can be prescribed. But now you might be able to find a doctor who would prescribe the drug to you in tablet form and then get a chemist to grind it up and make it into a solution. But a preparation made in that way has a strength which is a bit unpredictable and may even be dangerous to the user. So perhaps the wisest thing to do is to remember that baldness isn't a disease. And anyway, I've been told some women find bald heads quite attractive.
Well, of course, it's not just men who suffer from hair loss. It can happen to women as well, and when it does, it can be pretty worrying. Now, Ruth Coburn here, you've actually suffered some hair loss, and when was that exactly?
A few weeks after I had the twins, I noticed clumps of hair falling out on the pillow in hairbrushes, having washed my hair, and more recently the babies are pulling it out.
Actually grabbing whole great chunks of it and pulling it right out. That's quite worrying, isn't it? What actually, what did you do about that to try and make it better?
Nothing. I don't think you can.
You're quite right. What happened during pregnancy? I mean, did you notice anything different about your hair?
Well, her hair was quite thick and quite glossy and very healthy.
Yeah, in fact, that's interesting, because actually what happens in pregnancy is that the pregnancy hormones sort of hang on to the hairs that would usually sort of drop out as their life cycle comes to an end. The hormones hang on to those hairs, they hang on in there, and then after the pregnancy, when you've had the babies, then what happens there is that the hormones subside, they fade away, and there's nothing to hang on to all those hairs. So you've got masses and masses of hairs that are sort of time expired, and they all sort of fall out all at once, and very worrying it is. The good news is that it's a normal physiological reaction, and very soon your hair will revert to the normal state. Thanks very much, Ruth.
Stress is another cause for an increased rate of hair loss, and sometimes that loss can be very dramatic. Stuart, tell us what happened to you.
Well, when I was around about 15 years old, I was leading up to the exams, and I began to notice that there was some more hair loss than usual. I think it was when my mother started vacuuming the bed that I actually decided to go to the doctor. And he actually said that I had alopecia. I then was sent to the hospital and was prescribed various alcohol rubs.
Had you actually got to the point where you'd lost all your hair?
No, there was still some patches adhering where they did try to save. However, they did go eventually, and after about 6 months, I did lose all my hair. Yeah.
Now, at 15, that must have been very traumatic. How did you feel about it?
As you say, it was traumatic. However, with the support of my friends at school and relatives, I did find that I got through it fairly well. It certainly brought you out your shell.
And what sort of treatment did you say you had?
Well, I was given various alcohol rubs, which didn't really appear to work that well. And I was also given ultraviolet treatment, which lasted for about 3 months for each session.
And how soon did things start to get better?
Well, after about 6 weeks, there was definitely a noticeable difference with the vellus hair starting to change colour.
And gradually over the years, it all came back, did it?
Yes, eventually.
Well, it's lovely to see you've got a full head of hair now. Stuart, thank you.
Thank you.
Incidentally, we've all heard about people going white overnight, and that, in fact, is just another kind of hair loss. What's actually happening there is that the person starts off with a mixture of dark hairs and white hairs, and the stress somehow seems to cause a selective dropping out of the dark hairs, which leaves the white ones looking much more obvious.
But even when we've still got a full head of naturally coloured hair, we will go on doing things to it. And although hair's very tough, it's very vulnerable to abuse and interference. Left to its own devices, hair has a natural protective mechanism. And one of the things it has is an oily substance called sebum, which is produced in a gland down here. There it is, there. And that substance seeps up alongside the hair and comes out here on the surface. And also, it sinks into the hair, and it acts as a sort of dubbing. It's a natural hair conditioner. It soaks in, and it keeps the hair nice and supple and resilient and gives it a lovely natural sheen. The other important thing it does is it makes the hair waterproof, so that if you put water on the hair, it sort of runs off like water off a duck's back and takes all the dirt with it. But if you shampoo your hair, especially if you shampoo it with a shampoo containing a detergent, then that removes the oily sebum, and that takes away the natural protection of the hair. What happens then is that the hair dries out, all the cuticular scales open up like that. Water gets in there, actually into the inside of the hair, and that makes the hair shaft swell out like that. Again, that makes even more of the cuticle scales open up like that. And that, of course, means the hair is very vulnerable to scuffing, to abrasion. Bits of cuticle actually sort of fall off, and the fibres spill out, and the whole hair looks extremely tatty, and it's very, very vulnerable.
This photograph shows a normal, healthy hair magnified over 1,000 times. And you can see the little cuticle cells there, all lined up and all intact. But it's a different picture with this one. This hair has been roughly towel dried, and there you can see the surface looks pretty ragged, and it's even got a knot tied in it. Now, blow drying can cause this sort of trouble to the hair. There you see the little cuticle cells have been ripped off, and inside the fibres are beginning to splay out. And finally, if you just wash your hair and then brush it when it's wet, you can rip away the surface again like this and inflict this sort of damage.
And things get even worse if we try to change our image, if we try to glamorize ourselves. Let's just suppose that we have straight, mousy hair and we want to convert it into a nice sort of Duchess of York red, sort of Titian. Well, what do? Well, first of all, we have to get rid of the natural colour of the hair, so we have to use a bleach. Well, there we are. There's a bleach. But it's a strong chemical. It actually seeps into the hair and attacks the chemical structure of the hair and literally weakens it, so the hair becomes very brittle. OK, we get rid of the colour. We want to put in another colour. We want to put in a Titian. Here's some Titian right here. Now then, this is a chemical dye, which again goes into the very substance of the hair, and also it has the effect of preventing these cuticle scales from closing properly. So, once again, the hair is damaged because there isn't a decent, firm outer covering and armour plating.
So now you're a redhead, but say you want to have curly hair too. Well, to achieve that, you've got to twist and set these protein chains that are in the heart of the hair. Now, on our other hair model, there would have been thousands of these chains in every hair, but we're just going to look at 5 of them. So, if you want a temporary curl, all you've got to do is to break these weak hydrogen bonds, and you do that simply by wetting your hair. You then put the hair in its new curl position, and then you get the hydrogen bonds to reform just by drying it. But as soon as you wet the hair again, those hydrogen bonds will break, and you're back to your old limp, straight hair. So if you want a permanent curl, you've got to break these much tougher sulfur bonds, and you do that by using a perming lotion. You then put the hair in its new curled position on rollers, and then you get some, but not all of the sulfur bonds back bonded together by using a neutralizing solution. But not all of those bonds will reform, so you're left with some damage. Now that curl will stay there wet or dry, but to get a curl into the straight part of your hair that's continually growing out of your scalp, you've got to keep re-perming your hair, and that can cause further damage.
So does all this mean that the best thing for our hair is to do nothing to it and just leave it alone? Well, here's someone who was prepared to find out, Shari Val. Shari, when did you last wash your hair?
Oh, it must be a good 8 weeks since I touched it with shampoo.
8 weeks without a shampoo.
Yes.
Have you wet it or rinsed it?
I've wet it twice since I stopped washing it, but it doesn't like water very much, and I tend to try and keep it dry.
Now, everyone, I'm sure, imagines it must have been a pretty unpleasant 8 weeks. What was it like?
Well, the first 2 weeks were reasonable. It felt like you hadn't washed your hair. The 4th and 5th week were appalling. I had to unpeel my hair from my head in the morning. And it was like every time I touched my hair, I had to wash my hands. And my sister said I smelled of sheep, and it was horrible. It was really unpleasant. But the 6th and 7th week and the 8th week were much better. It started to settle down after a while, and its natural life came back. And it was looking pretty bad in the 4th, and it looked better in the 8th.
Oh, could we have a look at it now?
Yes, certainly.
Well, that certainly doesn't look as if it hasn't been washed for 8 weeks. Does it feel dirty? Or just...
Well, you can feel it if you like. It's soft.
It's lovely. Very nice condition.
It's a bit dry on the top, but it's naturally like that. This is how it looks normally, and it's amazing that it's returned back to its normal state after the 4th week.
Yes. Well, how about the scalp? Did that become irritated?
Well, I used to suffer from dandruff because my hair and scalp and skin is fairly dry. But since I've stopped washing my hair, my dandruff has disappeared completely. It's just gone. And you'd think that the scalp would itch and be horrible and disgusting, but it's not. It was pretty bad during the middle, but now it's fine.
But now after 8 weeks, I expect you're dying to get under a shower and have a good shampoo, aren't you?
Well, incredibly, no. You'd be really surprised. I don't think I'll ever wash my hair again, because it's nice now. It's in the best condition it's ever been.
Well, perhaps there's a lesson there for all of us. Shari, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Amazing. So, if you've got a good, healthy head of hair and you want to keep it that way, perhaps it's better left to nature. Here's Kate Robbins.
Washing my hair, check it's still there. Saying a prayer, I despair. I can't defend the way I mistreat my split ends. I twist it with beads, I find it recedes. What my hair needs is good deeds. Almost bald, I listened to a voice that called. It's better left to nature. It's better left to nature. Leave it to nature, don't go dyeing it red. The voice said leave it to nature, you should soothe your head. Leave it to nature, don't backcomb it each day. If your hair spoke to you, what would it say? Help, I can confess that many a tress has been under stress in a mess. All the pain I used to inflict on my mane, but it's better left to nature, and then your hair won't hate you. It's better left to nature.
Thank you, Kate. We'll be back with more Body Matters next week. See you then. Good night.
Of his father,